First of all, could you please introduce yourself? What's your name and what have you been doing with the climate strike movement?
My name is Nanticha Ocharoenchai, or Lynn, and I founded Climate Strike Thailand this year to join the Fridays for Future global climate strike movement.
So what people see was the parade, the movement at the center of Bangkok a month ago. What is the starting point of the movement and what role did you act in?
So the first time I did the global climate strike, that was in March this year, and that was the very first global climate strike where millions of youth came out, stopped going to school and skipped work to come demand climate action, climate justice. And in March, that was the very first time when I read this article about Greta Thunberg, and I just related. I just felt very hopeless and frustrated as to why no one cared about the environment. I had been working and writing about the environment for many years, but it seemed that the only people who cared were the people who already cared, and the people who don't care just don't care. And so I created this strike event, and over a day or two, more and more people got interested, and so that came to be the first climate strike in Thailand. And then we did the second one in May this year, and the number doubled, from 30 to 50 people to 100 or so people on the second time. And then the third time recently was almost 300 people. So yeah, numbers are growing. People are becoming more and more active and interested and passionate about it.
Have you been more pessimistic or optimistic after what you have done in the last year toward the issue?
I think it's ups and downs. With the whole climate change issue, I often get very pessimistic and hopeless seeing the progress that different countries are doing. But I wouldn't say pessimism is the right word. I think it's being realistic, just seeing what kinds of government policies each country is willing to put forward for the Paris Agreement, and seeing that's just simply not enough. But at the same time, there's no reason to give up. Like, after all, this is our life and our future we're fighting for. So if the governments are not doing enough, I think if anything, it's our job to push them more. It's our job to keep fighting and fight harder for it.
Mm-hmm. What would be the one thing that made you get up and did this?
I think in the beginning, I started Climate Strike Thailand because I was angry. I was just frustrated by the amount of people who didn't care. But then after the first strike, I realized I was wrong. So many people cared, and then that's what keeps me going every day is seeing the amount of support that people have, and the amount of people who are already out there doing different things, and not relying on the government to finally act on it. Different people are cleaning up ocean garbage or planting trees or changing their lifestyles to reverse climate change. And at this point, we have all the solutions. We just need governments and corporations to take on from it.
Mm-hmm. Have you been working with them, the government and big corporates?
I've been working with a few NGOs and talking to some government sectors, like some authorities, but definitely talking to a lot of sustainable businesses. This last strike, we handed in an open letter to the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment, demanding them to declare a climate emergency and commit to a zero carbon economy by 2040. Of course, they accepted the open letter and did not respond with concrete measures on it.
What would be the world that you will be living in? Now you are around 20-ish. When we speak about climate issues, it has to deal with generation a lot because in fact there won't be people who are living like in the next 10 or 20 years, but you're going to be living for the next, let's say, 40 or 50 years. What would be the world that you will get to live in if people don't act enough in the near future?
So with this whole climate movement, I wouldn't say it should necessarily be about the future. In fact, climate change is already happening right now and has happened for the last 50 years. Scientists have known about it. Politicians have too, but they decided not to act on it. Let's talk about the present first. We're already seeing the damages that climate change has on us. The impacts are extreme. For example, in Thailand, we are having extreme floods and extreme droughts at the same time. In 2019 alone, we've had the air pollution crisis with PM 2.5. We've had the floods and droughts, as mentioned. We've had extreme weather, precipitation, storms, and with that eventually comes food and water scarcity and displacement and illness. And most people in Thailand may have not experienced it directly for themselves yet, but I'd say give it less than 10 years and everyone will face that consequence. By 2030, it's been studied upon that Bangkok will be underwater completely and permanently. And this arises from a lot of management issues, like whether water management or land or resources, but a big deal of that is just from climate change. Climate change doesn't happen in one day. The world doesn't explode. It happens gradually, and humans are too incapable of understanding that change and what kinds of impacts it has on us.
Mm-hmm. Could you help me visualize, explaining when you said you are angry and when you are mad, when you see people don't act on these issues? What kind of angry and madness that you have toward this whole thing?
So I think right now in Thailand, a big idea is that when you talk about climate change or global warming, as we still call it, it's just about plastic. And that's as important as it is to address plastic pollution, it's just the tip of the iceberg of the whole climate change problem. But even with that, people know that using plastic is bad. People know that eating meat is a big contributor to climate change. And not even just Thai people, I'd say people all over the world. We know certain things are bad for the environment, but we still keep doing it because it's convenient, it's cheap, it's easy, it's trendy. For example, fast fashion. We know it comes from, unethical labor or it comes from unsustainable production, but we're gonna keep buying it anyway because it's cheap, it looks nice, I want more clothes, I want new clothes. So that's frustrating, especially if you're someone who works in the environment and lives in Bangkok where there's no green space. Bangkok is one of the cities with the lowest green space ratios in the world. Each person only has 3.3 square meters of green space to themselves. And I like trees. I love trees a lot. They make everything better. They make the weather cooler. They are pretty. They give us better air quality. But Bangkok seems to like shopping malls more. We tend to value that kind of economic growth and unsustainable development over things such as quality of living. And that's frustrating as not only as someone working in about the environment, but just as a citizen, as someone who lives in the city.
When we talk about this issue in the last few months, Greta Thunberg has become more widely known. But people, like especially in Thailand, a lot of them cannot still relate, like what she said and what we are doing and what are we positioned in this global climate. Can you help them link, like what do we have to do, because it's kind of there's a link between what she said and what we are doing now.
The thing with Greta and the climate movement is that I feel a lot of people may wonder why we protest about such things. Why not just go plant trees and actually, do something better for the environment? But the truth with climate change is that we need to hold biggest polluters accountable for it. No matter how much less plastic we use or how much less we drive or eat meat, at the end of the day, the biggest change is going to have to come from governments and corporations. They're the one who provide us with these amenities, and they're the ones who pollute most. We understand that as consumers, we have the choice and the decision-making power to choose whether or not we consume something sustainable. But what can we do if everything on the market is unsustainable? We're left with no option. And oftentimes, there are sustainable options, but what about people who have low income or people who don't know about the environment? It should be the duty of governments to take care of their people and of corporations to provide these sustainable options for their consumers. That should be their responsibility to taking care of the environment and the people. And that's what the movement is all about. It's all about using people power and voice to demand climate action and demand climate justice, because these people have already tried to change, but that's not enough. We need the system to change entirely. We need governments and corporations to put people and planet before profit. And good news is we can align them together. Being sustainable doesn't necessarily mean that you have to lose profits. There is a way of using clean and renewable energy and also creating a vast amount of jobs and a new economy, a new market for it. Or sustainable agriculture or regenerative farming that not only provides people with healthy and safe food, but that produces bigger and more yields in the long run. Whereas, walkable cities or cities with more urban green space or pedestrian-friendly roads, that reduces congestion, that reduces air pollution, while increasing productivity, saves people time, gives them better health. Sustainable fisheries. On the long run, you can fish more, harvest more, if only you gave nature to restore. But at this moment, we're looking at such a short term of just how do we make the most money in the least amount of time and the least amount of labor. And that's that doesn't work. That's unsustainable. That kind of system is capitalism working at its best, profiting the 1% of the world. And to change that, we need to change the entire system. We cannot put the responsibility onto individual consumers.
Well, coming to the last section, I would like you to talk straight to two set of people, one who is in power and another is ordinary people who may think that, okay, we have done our best and we cannot do anything else. I think that's an important message for them to get to hear. First, anything you want to talk to the government and the big corporates?
So governments and corporations, I understand that, money is important. The GDP is important. But I don't know, maybe I'm too young to understand, but I don't know what money is worth once you're dead. Once there's no more planet to live on, once there's no more future to use that money. What about your children? What about your own future? We're not talking about politics anymore and economy. This is just about survival. I want you to understand just the amount of urgency and the seriousness of this problem that we're facing is we are facing an extinction. We are facing death with your inaction to climate change and your continuance to pollute this planet. You are basically killing yourself. You're basically killing your children's futures. And if you don't care about that, what about the economic benefits that come along with, being sustainable and putting people and planets as a priority? Renewables are, at this point, much cheaper than fossil fuels. And sustainable agriculture, fisheries, or any kind of production on the long run is more profitable. But it's just about changing the way things are right now. And I understand that there are obstacles to it, whether political or economical, but that doesn't mean that we can improve along the way. And I'm not saying you should change. I'm saying you need to. I'm saying that there is no other option. We are literally all going to die if you don't stop fighting over political differences and literally just try to save your lives. And as for people, who are either already doing something to help reverse climate change or not, truth is, keep doing it. It's a good thing, live as sustainably as you can. There is no reason for you not to, even if it makes just a little dent in the system. But aside from that, it's important to come together and demand your rights. Climate inaction is a human rights violation, and we need to hold polluters accountable. We cannot individually change the system. We need to demand that change. And I understand that in Thailand or countries in Asia, it's a bit difficult to use, democratic or sort of a people voice to make these demands. But this is a global movement. You individually are part of a bigger movement, and together with enough loud and disruptive voice, we can change the people in power. After all, supply and demand goes together. The people who are consuming and making demands, if we stop consuming from certain brands, or if we stop demanding unsustainable products, businesses are given no option but to change their way of business. As for corporations and governments, people demand comes from supply. If you supply them with sustainable options, or if you force them to use sustainable options, they have no other choice. People will use anything that's easier for them, that's cheaper. If you provide us with those solutions, there's no reason we won't take them. So it's really enough of the blame game. It's everyone's responsibility in this. That isn't to say the governments, at the end of the day, governments and corporations are the biggest polluters, and the biggest changes will have to come from them. People have already changed, and at this point we're just waiting for them to.
Anything you want to talk to people?
I think for individuals, regardless of what kind of impact you make, I think the very first step to joining the climate movement or to being sustainable is educating yourselves about it. It's no longer about using less plastic. Climate change is so big of a problem that it links to our everyday life. Where does your power come from? Where does your electricity or your water come from? Or the rice that you eat and the water that you drink? Those all root from certain origins that may or may not be sustainable, and all those sources are impacted by climate change. That also goes along with the fact that whatever you consume doesn't just end as you're done consuming it. Once you're done consuming whatever you use, it goes a long way from that. When you throw a piece of garbage away, it does not end in the garbage bin. It ends up in different corners of the world, like the ocean. So it's just important to look around you and understand that whatever you're using at this moment comes from nature. Nature does not depend on humans. We depend on it for its resources. And so the biggest respect you can have for nature is using and consuming wisely and understanding where what you use comes from and where it goes.
All right, anything else you want to add? Have I missed anything I didn't ask? And it's important message for people to hear and act on this issue.
I guess if I were to point out the most concrete steps that individuals can do to help this climate movement is, first, educate yourselves about climate change and educate people around you. Create an awareness about it, create a trend about it. But don't be forceful about it. Tell people about how it benefits them, how it impacts them directly. Don't, especially for environmentalists, don't keep pushing the same hard scientific facts because people will not listen. You gotta talk the same language. Second is to consume less or consume sustainably. Consuming less, that is everything in your life. Water, gas, electricity, clothes, food, whatever you don't need, don't consume. before it arrives to your hands, all these products have come a long way and have produced a big carbon footprint and will continue to do so after your consumption. So reduce first and then, yeah. So by consuming sustainably, that doesn't mean that it has to be expensive. Consuming sustainably means having a plant-based diet or eating local, shopping local, supporting small-scale businesses, or using public transportation. It's really that easy. Next, everyone can plant trees. That's simple. That's easy, and that's not expensive. Everyone can do it wherever they have a space. And it's good for you. It's not just good for the environment. It's good for your health. It's good for your decoration of your house. I think those are the main steps that people can take immediately to change their own lifestyles and also change people around them.
I was thinking that one of the ridiculous thing once Greta became more known in Thailand is that people attack her on what she, like the way she acts, maybe talking about she having the condition of Asperger's. Do you face the same thing when you discuss about these issues in Thailand? Like, especially we live in a cultures where seniority is so valued, so important. Do you face the same thing with her?
In Thailand, I face more of issues of what does it matter if I change when no one else is? People don't believe in their own impact towards the society or towards the environment. I think it's because of our collective culture where we conform and we don't rise up and we don't take action until someone else does. But truth is, you can be that person and no one will take action if you don't. It works the same way around. With seniority, I don't face a lot of those problems because I have a social circle who doesn't really care about that. I grew up in an international school with adults and elders who listen to my opinion and take value of it, but I feel that's not the same for a lot of Thai schools or communities where they see kids as kids who shouldn't speak up, whose ideas and thoughts don't matter or are still too young to understand the complexity of the world. And I think the whole reason I started this movement, it only stemmed from my awareness of the environment, which came from education, and it stemmed from my courage to speak up because I wasn't afraid of doing so. I wasn't afraid anyone was going to scold me or shame me for doing so. So that was never part of my problem. And I want to see a community that encourages more of that. Because, Thais say a lot like, children are our future. But if that's the case, why aren't we giving our future a platform to speak up and express their ideas? We have these mottos valuing children and having a National Children Day every year, but we don't really seem to give importance enough to our youth. Yeah, and also the thing with Greta is, I think naturally the media and the public, they're going to have negativity towards anything good or anything they can't become or any cause they can't help, because that's the best thing they can do. Any person who thought they were better than her or thought they could do more to help solve climate change wouldn't even be complaining about her or criticizing her because they would have been too busy trying to solve the problem themselves.
Lastly, the last one. There are still people who have the skepticism on your movement because most of the people who attend the movement, maybe international school students, maybe I would say the upper income, like the upper level of the society, they would still think that the poor or even the middle class in the society won't be able to participate in this movement or won't be able to even participate in the help in global climate. What would you say to them?
I agree that the Climate Strike Thailand group right now is very consisted of a lot of foreigners and maybe middle to upper class Thais, but the truth is this whole climate change issue is about human rights for everyone. Climate change is actually going to impact lower to middle income people most. The most vulnerable communities are in areas where people have low income or low education without any means of protecting themselves or migrating if that were the case. If anything, this movement is for those people. The fact that they are not so much part of the movement is simply a lack of awareness. It's not that they don't care, I think it's that they don't know. And that is up to the Thai government or to schools, to businesses to educate their members about this issue. They are the people who seem to be left out of this conversation at this moment, sadly enough, are actually going to be the people most impacted from it, whether from natural disasters, from heat waves, from migration. It's not just the impacts, but the mitigation is not there. Once climate change hits, it will hit them the hardest, and sadly, the people who pollute the most and have made most profit out of it will be off the hook because they have the means of going somewhere better or protecting themselves. So that's what I'm trying to do with the Climate Strike Thailand name or group. It's trying to reach out to these people and informing them about the direct impacts that climate change has on them and also how they can demand that kind of right. What else? Yeah, I'd say the biggest part is just the lack of awareness of climate change in Thailand. We are actually one of the countries most vulnerable to climate change, but that's not being reported in our media. That's not being taught in our schools. How do you expect people to know if they don't read English or if they don't attend an international school when that issue is not being talked about? How do you expect them to protect themselves when they don't even acknowledge the problem? And also, the people who care about this movement, the people who choose to participate in climate strikes, those are the people who already know about the environment, who already know about climate change, and who already are interested in environmental conservation. Whereas the people who don't care about the environment will continue to not care because they have other priorities. And the only people advocating for it are in the environmental movement. So it's like preaching to the choir. And that message just ends up in that social circle. It doesn't expand much beyond that. So my goal with Climate Strike Thailand right now is to show that climate change isn't just an environmental problem, it's a human rights issue that affects people of all ages, all occupations, income levels, nationalities, races, religion. It's an issue that affects all human beings.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.